Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katie in Seattle. For those of you who are new to listening, I was taking a walk the other day and I was thinking there are some supporting players on this podcast. Tiffany is in Rome. She's been there for almost 20 years. And if you hear the names Claudio or Aurelio, they are husband and son. And if you hear Derek...
Respectively.
And if you hear Derek, that's also Katie's husband here in Seattle.
Yes, I suppose it's true. We do mention our partners and appendages sometimes without explaining who they are. So if there are new listeners, you're right, that might be confusing.
Yes. And I lived in Rome for a year. Tiffany's been there, as I said, 19 years, coming on 20. And yet I've also spent a lot of time in Rome since living there for a year. So that's our kind of perspectives. But both of us are from the Seattle area. And now that we've brought you up to...
we grew up together.
That's true. We met on the school bus in the 6th grade. So that brings us up to now. And today's topic, which is going to be a little wide-ranging perhaps, but it's basically, how do you be social again after a pandemic and in this new modern world? A world of rampant technology, of course, and also just different kinds of social engagement, I would say.
And evolving rules of what is acceptable social behavior.
Right. There's a few reasons why I thought we should bring this up today. One is a very personal conversation that you and I have over on the Patreon. So if you're not a supporter of us on Patreon, you might want to check it out. That episode's coming out the last week of this month. It is so personal that I didn't even really write what it was about in the description when I set it up to post, because you'll see why when you hear it.
And as I mentioned right before we start that conversation, that was a hard conversation to me, even if it had just been the two of us talking together by ourselves. It was even hard just to tell you about what I'd been thinking about, let alone a couple hundred people over on Patreon.
Right. And I also, it's one of those conversations that sort of just ends up kind of rattling around in your head. I don't know if that was the same with you, but after we finished talking about it, I think I carried it with me into like the things that were to come in my life. I carried that conversation around. That's all we're going to say about that. If you want to check it out, join us on Patreon. As little as $5 a month, you can hear these kind of slightly more private conversations that happen over there. Patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life podcast.
Yes. And you get 2 bonus episodes every month. And I was trying to figure out, Katie, because, you know, I'm not over in the States very often, but I was like, is that the price of a coffee these days? Like a fancy Starbucks coffee? Could it be as much as $5?
I think it's actually, I don't know because I don't go to Starbucks, but if I go to a normal coffee shop and I get an Americano, I would say it's even less than that, to be honest. Like the coffee...
Americano is less?
No, the $5 a month is less. I like going to this one particular coffee shop to write, and I believe my coffee there is $5.32 every time, something like that.
That's a lot of money for an Americano, which is basically just a shot of espresso in hot water.
I know.
Wow.
I know. I mean, I'm sure it depends on what part of the country you live in, but either way, I would hope that you listening would find this show more valuable than just a cup of coffee that you finish in an hour.
Especially because we're not asking you to give us a coffee every day. Once a month.
That's true.
It's really a good deal.
That's really true. And I've said it before, and this is not our topic, so I won't go on and on. But I do strongly believe that podcasts, especially if they're independent podcasts like this one is, if it's something that you love, it's a show that you really love, you should support it. I support 3 podcasts. I'm about to support 4, all of them independent. All of them made by the skin of somebody's teeth using their own dime. And I feel like it's my duty to support them because I like hearing them every week. And I know how much it costs to produce a show and how much time it takes. And so I do think that if there's a show that you really love and one that is not backed by a giant commercial enterprise, it is important to make sure that it is financially strong if you have the means. All right. On to the topic at hand, though. So this conversation that we will not discuss any further that's over on the Patreon this month did lead to me thinking about some of these issues. So let me just introduce it this way. I went to my first major party, I would say, in years, especially because of the pandemic, where the people there were majority my age. I knew a handful of them. I did not know the vast majority of them. It was a big party. It was wide ranging. It was like 2 households kind of flowing from one house to the other. And one of the things I really have wanted in the last couple of years is to sort of expand my horizons. Everything got so small during the pandemic that I've had a real craving for meeting new people, meeting new friends, reconnecting with old friends, trying to expand my social life back into what I enjoyed it being prior to pandemic, but also prior to moving abroad and coming home, and then moving to San Francisco, and then moving to New Orleans, and moving all over the place, and constantly having to try to start again. I feel like in the midst of all that, in the midst of all those changes and lockdowns, that I became kind of an island, is how it felt. The island of me. And part of what I wanted coming out of the pandemic and coming out of this into this new year is to try to expand that and be bold and go meet people and hopefully come out with some new people who really make life exciting and interesting. And like I said, reconnect with old friends. So I went to this party, and I don't know if you've had this experience, Tiffany, where probably on the outside, everything seems fine. Like you're not being terribly awkward. You're not being impossible to talk to. You're not even talking about boring things. You're just kind of hobnobbing and introducing yourself to people. And on the surface, everything looks fine. And inside, you feel completely different with the entire situation. And this whole party, I felt like I was just out of step enough with what was going on, whether I seemed like it or not, that I felt like the whole thing felt both like it could be fun, but I also felt like I was acting, like I had an internal monologue going. Like one thing I noticed, you and I are both fairly short people. I think I'm a shorter person than you, possibly.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Not by much.
I felt, for one, just physically so tiny at this party, right? I felt like everybody was so much larger than me. And normally, my size, while I do know that I'm a short, slight person, no question there, I'm not usually walking around thinking about my size in situations. Like I'm thinking about the conversation and the da-da-da-da-da-da. And then this, I just felt like, God, everyone is so tall. I feel like, like everybody has to like practically kneel down to talk to me is how I felt.
That's so strange.
I know. And then like the other thing, the whole time I just felt like, it's funny because I even tried to talk to my therapist about this and she's like, I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because I don't know what I was saying. But I felt like, while people were being civil and nice and chatting, that their interest in me was not very interested, and maybe it was because lots of people had lots of friends there, but it just felt like everybody was sort of like, oh yeah, hey, nice to meet you. And then like, I'm going to go over here and do this other thing, And so the thing is like that it could equally have been me. And then when I look at the party from the outside, and this objective of like hoping to meet new friends, hoping to try new things, hoping to reconnect with old friends. There were old high school friends of mine at this party also. New people, old people. I walked away with from the party when Jody and I were both like, that's good, let's go. My friend that went with me. But I also walked away with the party with the phone number of a woman who I chatted with for a good 20 minutes. And she was like, hey, you want to hang out sometime? And I was like, absolutely. And so like objectively, all went well. Like from the outside,
Yeah.
You got a new friend, you had a good time with your old high school friend Jody, and then you went home. But for whatever reason, this party has just haunted me ever since. And so now I've been like checking out how do I feel in other social situations, and I'm noticing places where I feel very confident and places where I feel very churny on the inside. And I think in a way that I didn't feel, especially on my own home turf, in the past. Like I've definitely felt this way moving to Rome, where I just had like a kind of crawling anxiety inside of me at times, where I just felt like I don't know where I belong in this situation. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to make friends with these people. But it was an unusual feeling, I think. I don't know. I maybe I just hadn't felt it for a while since moving back home after all that time abroad and adrift over the years. So I don't know.
Hmm.
Have you had any of that kind of feeling? Like I know you like hosting parties. You like going to parties too. So
Well, there's definitely a big difference between hosting a party and being a guest at a party where you don't know a lot of the people. I mean, that's kind of not even the same beast, really. I do like hosting parties. I like hosting medium to small parties. I can't really handle a big party because I want to be involved in every single thing that's going on. Like, I mean, I'm a FOMO person, you know that about me. So, like, I had a Christmas party this year, and I think there were 15 people at the party, including us and including three other children.
hmm.
So there were only really about 10 to 11 adults at the party, including us. And it was like just small enough that like I felt like I was keeping tabs on everybody. I was making sure everybody had enough to drink. I was making sure that there wasn't like trash everywhere. I was making sure that I was chatting with every single person and capturing some of the interesting moments that were just popping up around the room. And that is really what I like. I don't like to feel, I mean, especially if it's a party that I'm hosting, that I'm missing it. You know, like all this stuff is going on and I'm not part of it.
Yeah,
I
I
know
get that.
if that's weird.
Hmm.
When I'm a guest at someone else's party, to be totally honest, I don't go to a lot of parties, Katie.
Well, neither do
I'm
I.
trying.
That's I'm
I mean, but
trying.
like, but I mean, you're trying. Well, you have to get it invited first, don't you? Like, I feel like either my friends don't throw parties, or they throw like these very, very small get-togethers like the one I threw, which is basically people you already know. They're kind of always the same people. I kind of have finally sort of created this little social group. It's a little bit small for my taste. I would like it to be a little bit bigger, but we've got our relative partners, some of us do, and children, but it's always kind of the same people, which is great. I really like these people,
Yeah.
but I would also like to be exposed to more people. I would like to meet new people, but it's just I don't feel like that kind of social activity is happening within my social sphere. I don't know. I don't know that it's the pandemic. I feel like it was happening even before then. I really do. I feel like the party scene, and I don't mean partying as in going out and partying, but like the soiree scene, as it were, has kind of wound down in the past, I don't know, 10 years. And I don't know if it's stage of life or if it's the sort of big group, the big friend group that I once had here in Rome has dwindled simply because so many people have moved away. So many expats have moved away. So I don't know if it's an expat thing.
Yeah.
Like my expat community has just shrunk because so many people have left. I don't know. I don't know, but I do miss it. I'm a very social beast. I love being around a lot of people. I get energy from people. I feel like if I'd been to a party with old high school friends and I had met at least one person that I had a great conversation with who told me that they wanted to see me again, I would be like on cloud nine at the end of that night. That would have been a huge successful win for me. So I'm surprised that you had this negative feeling afterwards. I guess it was an internal situation.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
mean. Like that's what's so weird and so odd.
well,
Is
the truth is, Katie, you are much more of an introvert than I am.
well, that's not
Um,
true.
you don't think
No.
so?
Uh-uh. No. No.
You don't think you're more of an introvert than me?
I mean, maybe, but I would not define myself as an introvert.
Mm.
So, I mean, but
Um,
maybe I'm becoming one, and maybe that's the problem. I did
I
have a
just
question. I did have a question because, I used to be very good at hobnobbing because it used to be a big part of my job, getting to talk to anybody. And I really enjoying it, like really kind of thriving on the moving from one person to another. And I do find that I feel that way with different age groups. I don't have any problem talking to people who are older than me, you know? And that's another thing that I was wondering if that was a change was that, this party was not people who were older than me. These people were my age. And I was wondering if, because you have a child and I do not, And here we are in this mid stage of life where a lot of people my own age are off and busy raising children. That maybe people who have a child are better, especially coming out of the pandemic, at this hobnobbing with strangers, because hobnobbing with strangers is a part of having a kid in school. And hobnobbing, I mean, I guess with strangers of your own age.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, ever since we've entered this phase, and particularly because I spent so much of that time living abroad and living in other cities, I was doing all this hobnobbing, but I wasn't like building a community here. And since the pandemic, and because of where people are at with kids in our age bracket, it almost feels like people of our own age demographic are missing from the social scene, to me. And we've talked about this on the show a little bit, like that, because I'm not a parent, I don't think that they're missing to other parents. My friend Jody, who went to the party with me, has a kid who's in middle school. I think she spends a lot of time meeting people our own age, parents who are friends with her kid and, stuff like that.
Just remember that they might not be people that she wants to hang out with.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's more the skill I'm asking about. Like, does it keep up the kind of, and that's not even to say that I feel like I've lost the skill. Like I said, objectively from the outside, it went all fine. It was all about how I was feeling internally that night.
I don't know. I don't think there's an easy answer.
No. But you had another aspect of this that you were interested in talking about, and something that we kind of touched on in that episode that we cannot share about that's over on Patreon.
Well, I mean, we were both talking about this sort of social, I don't even know how to put it. Is it acceptable now to not respond to people over text messages, even like friends, like close friends, just not answer? And we've both recently been in situations where we've been texting friends, not each other,
No.
but other friends, and just crickets, just getting crickets back. And you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? Is this person really busy? Is this person rude, thoughtless? Or does this person not really care about me personally?
Right.
You kind of, I don't know about you, but all of these thoughts have kind of run through my head when I get sort of ignored in these situations. And I know that I've done it. I'm not saying that I'm completely guiltless on this issue. And I think most people have been in the situation where they have meant to write somebody back and then it slipped their mind, and then weeks pass and they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to write that person back. So it can happen to anyone.
Absolutely.
But I do think there are some people who it's a pattern with. And so those people, those situations, is it okay now? Is it acceptable? Because I feel like if we were to go back in time to a time when there were no cell phones and no text messaging, how did we get in touch with people? And if we didn't reciprocate, what were the consequences? And how has it changed? How has technology changed all of that? This is kind of an adjacent topic to the one we started out with, but on the same lines of sociality. And I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that it's really changed communication habits, social communication?
Oh, yeah. Changed? I mean, I think social communication has changed like tenfold over time. I mean, think about, this is all, it always gets tied up to how, is it the way the world is changing, or is it the age that we're at? And that is the hard question to answer. But I mean, like, think about how people used to come calling. And of course, this seems like a very high school thing to do, or a very Victorian period thing to do, to stop by with your calling card and see if somebody is willing to have a chat over tea. But I mean, I do remember.
Those were the days.
I do remember, just driving by your house, knowing that you were back in town from college, and just happening to be like in the right area so that I passed by your house and being like, oh, I'll just see if she's around, and just pop down and knock on the door. And then, maybe your mother would answer and be like, oh, she's not here right now. But it was not unreasonable that a person would just stop by. And now the idea of, in a modern society, of somebody just popping by seems quite alien, I think.
People don't even like to be called on the phone anymore.
Right.
I like certain people. If certain people call me, it annoys me. Just send me a text. not everybody, right? If
Yeah.
you called me or, someone, it's my father-in-law, let's be honest. It's my father-in-law and my boss. If my father-in-law and my boss call me, I'm like, could a text message not have sufficed?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I get it. I get it. But yeah, that's one thing. I mean, I remember when if you had kind of mentioned to a friend that you might get together on a certain night, this
Mm-hmm.
is obviously going back to high school days as well. It's like you might stay home that night and not go out with a different friend because you were expecting that first friend to call you.
Right. Yep.
And if they didn't call you and they weren't home and you called them and they didn't answer, like it totally ruined your plans for the night.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that, you couldn't really get away. I mean, people did do it, and especially that happened, I think, in a romantic nature. I mean, if you read books from before our time
Mm-hmm.
and even during our time, I there's a famous short story by Dorothy Parker called The Telephone Call, and it's
Mm-hmm.
basically a woman's stream of consciousness as she's waiting for the man she wants to call her to call. um,
Uh-huh. The torture. Yeah.
and yeah, that is absolute torture. And I mean, so in some ways, like, oh wow, how much more freedom do we have today? That we can just take our phones with us and not have to sit, quote unquote, sit by the phone. That was
Yeah.
horrible.
I don't miss that
Um,
for sure.
you don't
Definitely.
miss it.
No, not
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
sitting by the phone. Not
Not the sitting by the phone, but what I think you do miss, because I think you've told me about this before, is the sense of like when you make plans, those are your plans, and you don't change your plans and you don't show up late because there's no way to let the person know you're showing up late.
right. Yes, I do get that. And I do still like talking on the phone. I know people don't call much, but I don't mind if somebody calls and wants to talk on the phone instead. Yeah. And then I think with the texting and the emailing, I mean, that's where it gets tough because we are all like, especially with email, often inundated with emails. And so I think it's really easy to forget to answer an email, especially if you just read it at the wrong time and then it gets buried underneath other emails when you read it in the
You
wrong
gotta
time.
have you gotta have a system. You gotta
I
have a
know.
system.
You do have to have a system. But it is that question of the not texting, especially I think when it comes to a person who was in your life prior to all of the advent of this technology.
Well,
That I
you
think
have to
is
be of
where
a
it gets.
certain age for that.
I
Like if you're
know.
22, you don't have anyone in your life from
That's true.
before that time because that before that time never existed. But let's talk about people our age. Okay.
But you might have people in that time, like from before you had your own phone and you had friends who had to make plans with you in different ways. Unless you were a baby and your parents were like, here's a phone. uh, your whole life, you haven't necessarily had instant communication with your friends. Uh,
Hmm.
and it is interesting when you now have this instant communication with your friends that, in times past, you used to have to work much, much harder to get in touch with one another.
Hmm.
It is interesting when the people, they don't write you back. I don't know.
Here's a question. Here's a
Okay.
question on this same subject. Do you ever wonder if people don't write you back because they know that you, and I'm not talking just to you personally, but anyone,
Hmm.
um, could be myself as well. They know that you're the kind of person who's not going to make a big deal about it. I sometimes feel like maybe even on a subconscious level, the way that people treat you, especially people who know you really well, is based on what you let them get away with.
Mm. Hmm.
I used to know a woman, she was in my friend circle years ago, like 15 years ago here in Rome, and she was the type of person. She was really fun, funny, great to hang out with, a good friend when you needed her, but she was really tough. And if
Hmm.
you did something that like she didn't think was okay, she let you know, and she was harsh about it.
Hmm.
Uh, and nobody pulled any crap with her. People were always on their best behavior with this woman. It was funny to watch.
Oh, wow.
And we all worked together, and you'd see that in work situations as well. Nobody wanted to piss her off in a work situation because she knew she would give you hell. Whereas other people who were a little bit more easy to deal with, they kind of sometimes were not treated as well. And I feel like that can happen in social situations where it's like, okay, I got to write back this person, but they're not going to give me a hard time. Like maybe you don't even think about it. That person's not going to give me a hard time if I don't write back to them. They're just going to shrug it off. They're not going to hold it against me. So
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it.
Or
Could that
maybe,
be a
I don't know, because
part of it?
I mean, it's also interesting because we're in this like text arena where now you can give a thumbs up or a heart or something like that. Like if you actually don't want to write a person
Guilty.
back.
I'm so guilty of
But I
this.
mean, I think I don't even think it's about guilt. I think it's about acknowledgement. Like I was telling you about a longtime friend that we had, that mostly I had. I don't remember if you were friends with her or not. Doesn't matter. But I written her this message that was like, sent her a picture and wrote her this message, and like maybe she just read that and was like, oh yeah, that is a good idea. I do like this picture, and I will take what Katie advised me into account. And maybe she just didn't feel like there was anything to say, but she didn't give the heart response,
Yeah.
or there
I
was like
don't
no,
think
no no acknowledgement of receiving it. I mean, that's where it gets kind of weird and tricky. And I tend to not be a person who, I get what you're saying. I definitely tend to be a person who is forgiving. I don't take a lot of that kind of stuff very personally. I don't think I would have even thought about some of this stuff if you and I hadn't had the conversation we had over on the Patreon. You know, like it would
Mhm.
just have flown by me without me even like tracking certain things. And so maybe that's true. Maybe people just know that Katie doesn't really care about that stuff. You know, she cares about what happens when I'm around her or something like
Mhm.
that. Like I saw her message and all right, great, I'm on to other things. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if we can answer that question for ourselves.
I think it's got to be a combination of all those things. But I do know that you will always write me back. And I mean, yes, we work together. Okay, so we are constantly communicating.
Mm-hmm.
But even if, like it's summer vacation and we're not working for a month, if I write you, I know that you are going to write me back like probably within an hour of seeing it. I just
Mm-hmm.
know that about you.
That's true.
Um, and I feel like, is Katie does she have so much more free time than my other friend? No, it's not that. It's not that. So what is it? What's the difference? Is it that you're just a much more polite person? Are you just care a lot more about me personally? Is it just a habit that you have? I don't
Mm.
know. I mean, it's got to be one of those things or all of those things. I don't know. I do think that texting someone back right away can be a habit that you like make yourself do it instead of just thinking I should write this. Like, I don't know, this happens to me. Like, I'll get a message from someone and I'm like, I'm going to write them this. And like, I think of this really nice response and then I don't write it. I
I've done the
just do
one.
it.
I've done the one where you think that you wrote it, and then like later on, you're gonna send them a different message, and you see that it's still in the outbox, like you didn't push send. I've definitely
Well,
done
that's
that.
just an accident. That's just an accident.
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely have like I have good intentions to write people back. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people write me like someone writes me something so nice that in the moment I'm like, I can't respond to this right now. Like it's gonna take too much emotion for me to write back to this person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can put it off. It's just even a nice thing. It's a nice, like I had a friend, an old friend of mine, write me. I sent him a Christmas photo of me and Aurelio, and he wrote the nicest message back, just saying, I gotta find this. When I need an inspiring, beautiful story of how living well and bravely brings a wonderful life, I think of you, Tiffany.
Oh.
Literally, truly. And it's not just a Christmas thought. That's just the occasion. That's the catalyst for sharing it. But I think it often. Thanks for that.
Oh, that's so nice.
I know. He's so nice. And I got this message and I was like, I can't write back to this right now.
Thumbs
Like
up
it's too
emoji. Yeah.
yeah, like yeah. So luckily, like 2 days later, I happened to see it again and I wrote him back. But like in the moment, it was like late at night. And I often get texts like from my mom or from you or from other friends late at night because of the time difference. And I'm like, I don't have the emotional energy to write back to a message like this right now.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I think usually if I delay, it's one, I haven't noticed it. Especially if I'm writing, sometimes my phone isn't nearby, and so I just don't hear it, you know? So, like, I don't know, hours and hours and hours go by. But other times, it's like, it's usually if I delay, it's either what you're talking about or it's that, they're asking me a question like, when can we hang out or something like that, and I actually don't know yet. I have to like look at some things. I need to like ask Derek a thing or two. I need to see where these couple meetings are lining up that I have already sent emails out about, and then I can answer. I could
Yeah,
probably meet up
that's
on this
true.
day.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes it feels like maybe somebody's like, "Hey, can we hang out?" And then like 2 days go by or one day goes by. I don't know if I ever let 2 days go by, but It's usually me just trying to figure out what can I tell them without being like, let me get back to you. Because if I say, let me get back to you, I might forget that I need to get back to you. So I'm trying to like have it still in there so that I'm like, yeah, I am trying to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. And then I'm going to write to you and propose a time.
Yeah, there should be a way. There should be a way on WhatsApp to like, you can do it on Instagram. Like you can put a flag on a message so you notice it more easily. I don't think there's a way to do that. You can do that probably on emails as well, but I don't think WhatsApp has that function. But that would be a good idea. WhatsApp people do that.
But I mean, but I think when it comes to like the friends that we have that just don't answer, like where you can write them 3 times and then for whatever reason they'll answer that third or fourth time. That is, I don't know if you'll ever have an answer to like why unless you directly ask them. And even then, I don't know if you'll get a good answer. But I
I want to know is it everybody or is it just me? Right? Like,
yeah.
isn't that way,
I think the truth of the matter is that it couldn't possibly be everybody. But maybe it is everybody. But I feel like there's always people like you were saying, in the secret episode, the one thing I'll share, I think that you said in that episode was Claudio writes you 1,000 times a day. Just kidding, not that many. But that you usually respond to him because, if you don't answer, he's just like, where are you? What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's part of like the back and forth of like running a household together, I think. So I do think that everybody has a person in their life that they respond directly to. Even if they're single, they probably have a best friend that they respond directly to. But is it everybody else?
Okay, here's another thing. Here's another thing. What is the deal with the people who don't even look at your message?
Yeah.
You don't even get the double blue check marks. Okay? This gets me because I'm not talking about romantic situations. Okay. So this is for the purposes of this conversation, we're really just talking about social interactions between friends and other social acquaintances. Because obviously in romantic relationships, you've got a whole other can of beans with this whole ghosting situation, which I am.
Let's not get into that. Yes.
Yeah. But what is the deal? That this person, like you said, let's say a friend, a hypothetical friend of mine who we've been friends for a long time, and she's always ignoring my text messages. And I know that we're not having a fight. There's nothing going on that would warrant this, like we've had an argument or anything like that. She's got that one person in her life who she does check in with, maybe 1 or 2 people. So it's not like she just doesn't use WhatsApp or whatever her messaging app is. It's not possible. So you've clearly seen that I've sent you a message and you've chosen not to click on it. Like I'm one of those people who, like, if I've got a message in my inbox and I see it, I can't not click on it.
You want to know. Yeah.
I want to know what it says. And of course, now there's that thing. I sound so old talking about this like this, but now there's the thing where, on your home screen or on your lock screen, like you can see the first 2 sentences of the message.
Right.
So if you really wanted to, you could act like you hadn't seen the message, which guilty. I've done it. I've definitely done it.
Mm-hmm.
But to go on for days and days and then, beyond and never click on that message or, not click on it for weeks, that is truly, I can understand forgetting. I can understand being busy, but I don't get that.
Yeah.
Do you have any answers for that?
I have one thing that might tap into your I'm an expat and this is an expat problem feeling, is that WhatsApp is another additional app on a phone that we use to communicate because it's free internationally. But if you were in the States, you'd probably be texting by text, SMS text to each other, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's an additional app, it is possible that a person doesn't let it give her notifications, and maybe it doesn't even have a sound. So it takes noticing that there's a new message mark on that app to know that there's a message there. That's a possibility.
Okay.
Like if they are not a person who likes to get a lot of notification sounds, it's possible that it's just not pinging her like it would a normal text message.
All right.
It's possible. And so it takes a while.
Accept that possibility.
Yeah, it takes a while to even notice it. And then you're like, oh, crap. Oh, no. there's a message here, and it's been, I don't even know, there for 1,000 years, and I didn't notice it.
All right, fair enough.
So, I mean, you do have that cover as an expat, I would say. It does
Maybe I
not
should start
explain.
texting people.
Yeah, it does not explain why my friend who gets text messages from me here in the same city hasn't answered. But that's a case for another time, because we should leave it there. Because you could just go around and around. If you really want to hear this get super heated and very personal in a way that it echoed in my mind for days and days and days afterwards, including thinking like, should I have not said that to Tiffany, even though I believe it to be true? You can join us over on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/The Bittersweet Life Podcast. You'll do two things. You'll get to hear this episode, and you'll get to support an independent art podcast. This show supported only by you and not by institutional backing. You are vital to the continuation of this show. So it's a win-win for everybody.
And you get access to all of our back bonus episodes.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff back there.
A lot of stuff back there. A lot of stuff back there. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. If you love the show, take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love to read while you listen, and your rating might help someone else discover the show. Take just a couple of minutes to let the world know what you think of this show. It means the world to us. Thanks.